When my son forgot everything I had sacrificed for him, I did not cry. I did not shout. I just stood there in the quiet hallway of his home, holding the small bag I had packed, wondering how love could fade so quietly. It happened on a cold morning. The kind of morning when the light looks softer, and yet somehow every truth feels sharper. My daughter-in-law, Emily, stood by the kitchen counter with her hands folded. She was nervous. I could see it in the way she played with the edge of her sweater. My son, Michael, avoided my eyes. He looked down at his coffee as if the answers to all of life's problems were hidden inside that cup. Then she said it, so gently that it almost sounded like kindness. "Mom, we think it's better if you stay somewhere else for a while." I felt the words land on me like cold rain. Not harsh, just quietly painful. My heart wanted to break, but my face stayed calm. Years of motherhood teach you how to hide the storms inside you. I nodded. I even smiled a little. Because that is what mothers do. We make the pain smaller so our children don't feel guilty. But inside me, something was sinking. Something deep and heavy. I had spent my entire life loving this boy. Working extra shifts. Skipping meals. Sleeping on the floor when we could not afford a bigger room. Sending him to college with money I never really had. Taking care of his son when Emily returned to work. I was the silent thread holding everything together. But now, I was suddenly an inconvenience. A problem to solve. Someone they needed space from. I walked out of the kitchen with a steady breath, but each step felt like I was walking away from a lifetime of memories. At the door, I looked back once. Michael still wouldn't meet my eyes. That was the moment I realized something important. Sometimes the people we love the most forget us. But life has its own way of reminding them. And this is the story of how that reminder came back to him, slowly, painfully, and... My name is Linda, though everyone used to call me Mama Lynn. I'm 62 now. My knees ache when I climb stairs. My eyesight isn't what it used to be. But my heart is still full. Sometimes it hurts, yes, but it also remembers. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Life was simple back then. We didn't have much, but we had each other. My parents believed in hard work and honesty. Those were the values I carried into my own life when I became a mother at 23. Michael was my only child. My whole world. I still remember the night he was born. The hospital lights were too bright, and my hands were shaking, but the moment they placed him on my chest, everything inside me softened. I had never felt love so powerful, so immediate, so demanding. I raised him alone after his father left when Michael was 3. Those early years were hard. I worked as a cleaner at a nursing home during the day and washed dishes in a diner at night. There were weeks when I slept only 4 or 5 hours a night. But every time I saw Michael's small face, every time he held my finger and smiled, it felt worth it. He was a quiet child. Soft-spoken, always reading something or building little things with his hands. I tried to give him everything I never had. Not money, because money was always short. But time, attention, love, the things children remember even when they grow older. At least, I hoped they would remember. As he grew, life became a little easier. I got a job as a hospital receptionist. It didn't pay much, but it was steady. And steady was enough. When Michael turned 18, he received a partial scholarship to study engineering. I cried the day we got the letter. Not because I was sad, but because I knew he had worked so hard. He deserved that chance. But scholarships don't cover everything. So I worked overtime, took temporary jobs on weekends, and even sold some of the jewelry my mother left me. Every penny went into his education. Every dream I had was tied to his future. I never saw those sacrifices as burdens. In my heart, that was simply what mothers did. Life in my son's house started out gently. At first, I felt welcome. Or maybe I wanted to believe I was. When Michael and Emily asked me to move in after I retired, I thought it was because they needed me. Their son, little Noah, was only 3 then. A bright boy with wide brown eyes and a laugh that filled the whole room. Emily had just gone back to work. Michael worked long hours at his engineering firm. They said, "Mom, it will be easier if you're here." I believed them. I wanted to believe them. Those early months were peaceful. I cooked breakfast. I took Noah to the park. I folded laundry, cleaned the house, made warm dinners. I thought I was helping. I thought I was doing what mothers do when life circles back and asks for another round of love. But slowly, very slowly, small cracks began to show. It started with comments so small I almost ignored them. One morning, while I was in the kitchen preparing oatmeal for Noah, I heard Emily whisper to Michael in the hallway. She rearranged the spices again. Her tone wasn't angry, just irritated, a soft annoyance, the kind people feel when something is out of place. Michael replied quietly, "She's trying to help, Em. I know, but I like things a certain way." I kept stirring the oatmeal, pretending I didn't hear. My hands felt a little colder. My smile felt a little tighter. I told myself it was nothing. But small things, when they happen often enough, become heavy. A few weeks later, it was about the laundry. I had folded Noah's clothes and placed them in his small dresser, just like I always did. That afternoon, Emily refolded everything. She didn't say anything, but I saw her hands move fast, almost anxious, refolding each shirt, each tiny pair of socks. "I hope I didn't fold them wrong," I said softly from the doorway. Emily didn't look up. No, it's fine. I just have a system." A system. That word stayed in my mind like a cold stone. I nodded and left the room quietly, but my heart felt like it was shrinking inside me. Over time, these systems appeared everywhere. A system for the dishwasher. A system for towels. A system for the pantry. A system for their mornings, their nights, their routines. I felt like a stranger slowly learning a language nobody wanted to teach me. But I loved them, and love makes you patient. So I adjusted. I tried to stay out of the way. Tried to fit into the spaces where I was still needed. Mostly that was with Noah. He was my joy, my soft place in that house. Every morning, he would throw his small arms around my legs and say, "Grandma." That one word made every ache worth it. But even that, eventually, became complicated. One Saturday morning, Michael and Emily planned to take Noah to a children's museum. They were excited. It was their family day. I packed Noah's small backpack with snacks and a sweater. I had always done that. But Emily gently took the backpack from my hands. "It's okay, Linda. I already packed everything." Her smile was polite, but distant. Like a smile given to a stranger you don't want to offend. "Oh," I said softly. "Of course." I stepped back, unsure what to do with my hands. Noah lifted his arms toward me. "Grandma, come." I bent down, hugged him tightly, and whispered, "Next time, sweetheart." Emily paused. There was a flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or frustration. I couldn't understand it. Later that afternoon, when they returned, the house was filled with soft tension. I could feel at the moment the door opened. Noah ran to me, excited, jumping. "Grandma, dinosaur." But Michael's face looked tired. Emily's mouth was drawn tight. Everyone went to their separate corners. There was silence, thick silence. After dinner that night, Emily approached me in the kitchen. "Linda, I know you're trying to help. I really do. But sometimes it feels like you're taking over." Her words were gentle, but they felt like a cold hand pressing on my chest. "Taking over?" I whispered. She looked down at the counter. "It's little things. Packing things. Feeding Noah too often. Rearranging stuff. I know you mean well, but I'm trying to build my own routines as a mother." A mother. Those words echoed deeply. I had spent decades being one. It was my identity, my purpose, my heartbeat. But now it felt like motherhood was something I had to step away from, even though the love inside me still wanted to give, to care, to do. I took a slow breath, holding my emotions together. "I never meant to make you feel less like his mother," I said softly. "I know," she replied, still not meeting my eyes. That conversation stayed with me for days. It wasn't a fight. There were no raised voices. Just quiet disappointment. Quiet confusion, small tension, small wounds. Another moment happened 2 weeks later. It was late evening. I was in the living room, reading a book, when I overheard Michael and Emily talking again. Their voices were low, but the walls in that house were thin. Emily said, "We need our space back." My heart froze. Michael sighed. "She's my mother. I know, but she follows me around, she corrects things, she hovers when I cook, I closed my eyes. I felt a sting behind them. Hovering, following, correcting. Was I doing those things? I didn't mean to. I only wanted to be useful. Michael spoke again, quieter. "I think she's lonely." Emily was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I understand that, but I can't live like this forever." I didn't move, didn't breathe. I felt like I was standing inside an invisible storm. Later that night, I lay awake in the small guest room, staring at the ceiling. Thinking, remembering, all the nights I stayed up sick with worry when Michael had fevers as a child. All the days I spent sewing patches onto his worn school pants. All the meals I skipped so he could eat more. I wondered if every mother had this moment. When love becomes memory, when service becomes burden, when presence becomes unwanted. But I still convinced myself it would pass. That we would adjust. That this was just a phase. Yet things kept building. One afternoon, I made chicken soup. I used the recipe my own mother taught me, the recipe Michael grew up loving. When Emily came home, she looked at the pot on the stove, then at me. "Oh, I was planning to cook tonight." Her voice was flat. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. I thought, "It's fine," she interrupted, but her tone said it wasn't. That evening, I heard her talking to her sister on the phone. "She's always here. She cooks everything. She does everything. I feel like a guest in my own house." My chest tightened as I stood in the hallway, unseen. The words cut deeper because I knew she genuinely felt that way. And I wasn't trying to take her place. I wasn't trying to be the center. I just didn't know how to be half a mother. I only knew how to love fully. The tension grew heavier after that. Michael became quieter. Emily became more distant. I became smaller. One day, Noah had a fever. I was worried, deeply worried, and I stayed by his side all afternoon, cooling his head with a damp cloth. When Emily came home and saw me next to him, she looked upset. "You should have called me," she said. "I didn't want to bother you," I said gently. "I'm his mother," she replied. There it was again, that invisible boundary. That line I didn't understand how to walk. That night, when the house was dark, I heard Emily crying softly in the bathroom. I wanted to knock. I wanted to comfort her. But I didn't, because I didn't know if my comfort was even welcome anymore. And then, the final small moment happened. The moment that made everything else suddenly make sense. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Sunlight filled the kitchen. I was pouring myself a cup of tea when I heard Emily behind me. "Michael and I were talking," she said softly. I turned, holding the warm cup in my hands. She looked nervous. Her fingers were fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. I think we all need some space." Even before she fully said the words, I felt my heart sink. "Space?" I repeated. She nodded. "It's not permanent. Just for a little while." Time felt heavy. I heard the clock ticking behind me, and even that sound felt louder. I took a breath. A small, painful breath. "I see," I whispered. But inside, I felt a slow breaking. Not loud, not dramatic, just breaking. Pieces of me falling quietly. That was the beginning. The quiet beginning of the bigger hurt that would come later. The rising conflict. The slow turning of love into distance. But at that moment, I didn't know how much worse it would get. Or how life itself would one day remind my son of everything I had done. Everything he had forgotten. The day everything truly changed wasn't dramatic at first. It didn't begin with shouting. It didn't begin with anger. It began with silence. A soft, heavy, uncomfortable silence. It was a Tuesday morning, cool and cloudy. The kind of morning where the sky looks pale and tired, like it doesn't want to shine. Rain was expected later, but the air already smelled wet and heavy. I woke early, as I always did. Old habits stay with you even in a house where you feel like a guest. I went to the kitchen to make a pot of tea. I moved slowly, carefully, trying not to make any noise. I didn't want anyone to feel disturbed by me. The house felt cold, not the temperature, but the atmosphere. I sat down at the small table, wrapped my hands around the warm cup, and wondered how I had become afraid of making normal sounds in my own son's home. Around 7, I heard Michael's footsteps coming down the stairs. He wasn't alone. Emily was right behind him. They weren't talking, but the air around them felt thick, like they had already had a long conversation upstairs. Michael looked tired. Emily looked tense. For a moment, no one said anything. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen. Then Emily stepped forward. "Linda," she said softly. "Can we talk?" My heart dropped into my stomach. She only used that tone when something serious was coming. I nodded slowly. Of course. My hands began to shake just a little as I placed my cup on the table. Michael didn't sit. He stood with his arms crossed, his eyes avoiding mine. That told me everything. Something was wrong. Something big. Emily took a deep breath. We've been thinking, and we believe it's best if you don't stay here anymore. The words didn't hit me all at once. They came slowly, like a wave rising before it crashes. I blinked. I don't understand. Emily's face softened with guilt. It's not that we don't care about you. But things have been hard. The routines, the space, the boundaries, everything feels crowded. Crowded. I felt the word settle into my chest like a weight. I looked at Michael, hoping he would defend me. Explain things. Say something kind. Say anything. But he didn't. He just stared down at the floor, silent. My voice trembled. I thought I was helping. You were, Emily said quickly. But it's becoming difficult. For all of us. For me too, I whispered. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Michael finally looked up. Mom, maybe it's time you have your own space. You retired. You should relax. You should enjoy your freedom. Another word that sounded almost beautiful but felt like rejection wrapped in polite fabric. I swallowed hard. So, you want me to leave? He hesitated, then nodded, slowly, gently, quietly. Yes, that one word broke something inside me. Something I had spent years building. A mother's heart is strong, but not unbreakable. I held the edge of the table to steady myself. When? I asked. Emily glanced at Michael. He cleared his throat. Maybe today. Today. Not next week. Not in a few days. Not. After finding a proper place to go. Today. The house suddenly felt smaller. Narrower. Like the walls were moving closer. My voice came out thin, almost a whisper. Do you already have a place in mind for me? Emily sighed softly. There's a small apartment building near Maple Street. They have short-term rentals. We can help you move your things there. A rental. Short-term. Temporary. Not a home. Not family. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't trust myself to speak without breaking. I'll pack my things, I whispered. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to move. Step by step. As I reached the hallway, I heard Noah's small voice from upstairs. Grandma? My heart clenched. I turned and looked at the stairs. He was rubbing his sleepy eyes, holding his stuffed bear. He ran toward me and hugged my legs. I bent down and held him close. The scent of his hair, warm and sweet, filled my heart with pain. Are you leaving? He asked in his small voice. I tried to smile. My lips trembled. Just for a little while, I said. He tightened his arms around my neck. No, don't go. Those 3 words nearly broke me. I looked up and saw Emily watching. Her expression softened with guilt, but she didn't stop me from leaving. I kissed Noah's forehead gently. I'll see you soon, sweetheart. I wasn't sure if it was true. But I said it anyway, because that is what love does. It gives hope even when it has none. I packed my things slowly, one item at a time. The room felt cold and small, as if it had shrunk overnight. My clothes, my books, my sewing kit, a framed photo of Michael as a child. I wrapped each item carefully, not because they were fragile, but because I was. At one point, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photo. It was a picture of Michael at age 6, missing one front tooth, holding a homemade kite. I remembered that day. He had asked me to make a kite for him because the store-bought one didn't feel like his. I stayed up until 2 in the morning sewing it together with scraps of fabric. When he saw it the next day, his face lit up. Mama made it, he told everyone proudly. How fast pride turns into inconvenience. I wiped a tear before it could fall onto the photo. When I finished packing, I zipped up the small bag. It was the same bag I used when I went on work trips years ago. Back then, leaving home felt temporary. Now, leaving felt permanent, like I was walking out of a chapter that had already ended behind my back. I walked downstairs slowly. Michael and Emily were waiting in the living room. Michael stepped forward. Mom, we're not abandoning you. We're just trying to make things easier. Easier for who? I wanted to ask, but I didn't. Instead, I said, I understand. But I didn't. Not fully. Not yet. He took my bag for me, and we walked to the car. The sky had grown darker, and the first drops of rain were starting to fall. It felt symbolic, like the sky itself was quietly crying with me. I sat in the back seat. Emily drove. Michael sat in the front. I stared out the window as the house grew smaller behind us. Every memory I had built in that home, every laugh, every meal, every moment with Noah, seemed to fade with distance. I felt invisible, unneeded, forgotten. When we reached the apartment building, it looked old, a little worn down. The paint was chipped, and the staircase railing shook when touched. Not the kind of place you send someone you love. But I didn't say anything. They walked me to the door of the small rental unit. The apartment smelled like dust and old carpet. The windows were small. The walls felt bare and cold. Michael set my bag down near the kitchen counter. "We'll help you settle in," he said softly. I shook my head. "No, it's fine. You should go. No one needs you." Emily nodded quickly, almost relieved. Michael hesitated for a second, then leaned in to hug me. His arms felt stiff, like he wasn't sure how close he should get. When he stepped back, he didn't look into my eyes. "Mom, please understand. We just need some time." I forced a small smile. "Of course. Take all the time you need." They walked to the door. Emily opened it. Before stepping out, Michael said, "I'll call you later." I nodded. Then they left. The door closed softly behind them. The moment the latch clicked, the silence inside the apartment felt overwhelming. Heavy, lonely, unbearable. That was the turning point. Not because they asked me to leave. Not because I found myself alone again at 62, but because for the first time in my life, I realized something painful and undeniable. My son didn't see my sacrifices anymore. My love had become a background sound, familiar, quiet, easy to ignore. I sat down on the old couch and finally let myself cry. Not loudly, not angrily, just soft tears, quiet tears, the kind that come from a heart that has carried too much for too long. In that little apartment, with rain tapping softly against the window, I whispered to myself, he forgot everything I did for him. But life has a way of reminding people. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I believed it deeply. And I was right. Life would remind him, slowly, painfully, beautifully. In a way none of us expected. The first few weeks in that small apartment were the hardest days of my life. Every morning, I woke up expecting to hear Noah's footsteps running toward me. Every evening, I expected Michael's car to pull into the driveway. But the apartment had no driveway, and no little footsteps filled its silence. It was just me, only me, and the quiet. I tried to fill my days. I cleaned the same shelves twice. I rearranged the small pantry. I stitched old pieces of fabric into little patterns that didn't matter. Anything to keep my mind busy. Anything to stop the ache. The phone rarely rang. Days passed. Then a week. Then two. Silence. I kept telling myself, they're busy. Life is busy. They'll remember me soon. But those words felt thinner with each passing day. The only real comfort I had was walking. Every afternoon, I walked slowly along the sidewalk near the apartment building. The trees along the street were old, tall, and comforting, almost like they understood my loneliness. Sometimes I would pass by the small children's park. Sometimes I watched the kids play from a distance. Their laughter lifted my heart and broke it at the same time. I wondered if Noah laughed like that. If he asked for me. If he missed me. One day, after almost 3 weeks of silence, Michael finally called. But it wasn't to invite me back. It wasn't to say he missed me. He only said, "Hey Mom, hope you're doing okay," and then talked about work for a few minutes before hanging up. That call stayed with me for days, not because it was warm, but because it wasn't. I didn't blame him. I told myself over and over, they're young. They have their own life. They'll understand someday. But part of me wondered, when does someday come for mothers? Time passed. About 2 months later, I received a text message from Michael. Not a call. A text. "Mom, can you watch Noah next Saturday? Just for a few hours." My heart jumped. Of course I could. I would have walked through a storm to see my grandson. I replied immediately, "Yes, I'd love to." That Saturday, I cleaned the apartment twice before they arrived. I wore my nicest sweater. I made a small batch. She paused, searching for the right words. "Crowded, but it wasn't your fault. I'm sorry." Hearing her say it, calmly, honestly, felt like a soft bandage over an old wound. "I understand," I said. And I meant it. Motherhood teaches you forgiveness the way rain teaches flowers to grow, slowly, quietly, patiently. Then life delivered the moment that truly reminded my son of everything I once was to him. It happened in winter. Michael slipped on ice outside his office building and injured his leg. Badly. He had to stay home for weeks. Couldn't walk without help. Couldn't go upstairs easily. Couldn't carry his son. Couldn't drive. Emily worked double shifts to cover bills. Noah needed attention. The house needed care. And suddenly, they needed me again. In a way they didn't expect. In a way they hadn't needed me since the day Noah was born. When Michael called that night, his voice was trembling. "Mom, can you come? Please?" Those words, "Can you come?" were the ones I'd waited months to hear. Not, "Can you babysit?" Not, "Are you free Saturday?" But, "Can you come?" I arrived the same evening. When I walked into their house, the place looked worn. Messy. Exhausted. Emily hugged me tightly. She didn't speak, but her arms said everything. Michael was on the couch, leg elevated, a look of frustration mixed with regret on his face. "Mom," he said, voice cracking a little, "I'm sorry. For everything." I sat beside him and placed my hand on his. "Rest," I whispered. "I'm here." And for the next 6 weeks, I became their quiet support again. I cooked. I cleaned. I washed sheets. I drove Noah to school. I helped Michael move around the house. Not because I wanted praise. Not because I expected recognition. But because love doesn't retire. A mother doesn't stop being a mother just because someone forgets. One night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Michael called me into the living room. He looked emotional. Something I rarely saw in him. "Mom," he said quietly. "I thought independence makes a man strong. I thought handling everything myself meant I was a good husband, a good father." He paused, swallowing hard. But I was wrong. I pushed away the person who held our family together. My eyes softened. "You were learning," I said gently. He shook his head. "No, I was blind." He took my hand, something he hadn't done since he was a child. "I didn't forget your sacrifices," he said softly. "I just didn't understand them until now." I felt a warm ache in my chest. Not pain, something softer, something healing. Sometimes life teaches lessons slowly. Sometimes love circles back. Sometimes children grow twice, once in youth, and once in wisdom. That night, Michael cried quietly. And I held his hand the same way I did when he was 6 and scared of thunderstorms. When Michael finally recovered, things were different. Not perfect, not sudden, but different in the quiet ways that matter. Emily visited me more often, sometimes with Noah, sometimes alone. She asked for my recipes. She invited me on family outings. She hugged me without hesitation. Michael called me every morning, even if only for a minute. He didn't wait until he needed something. He called because he wanted to. As for Noah, he never stopped loving me. He never built walls. Children rarely do. And one spring afternoon, Michael stood in my apartment doorway with a nervous look on his face. "Mom," he said softly, "we've been talking. We want you to move back. But this time, as family, not as a helper. With your own space, your own comfort, your own respect." My heart trembled. Not because I needed their house, but because I needed to feel seen again. I smiled, tears warming my eyes. "I'll think about it," I said gently. He nodded. "We'll wait, as long as you need." That was the moment I knew everything had changed. Not because they needed me, but because they valued me. Not because they expected my sacrifices, but because they remembered them. Life had reminded my son. Not through punishment, but through humility. Through struggle, through understanding, and love returned. Quietly, tenderly, honestly. The house is quiet now. Not the heavy kind of quiet that presses on your chest, just a soft, gentle calm. The kind that feels like an old friend sitting beside you, reminding you to breathe. Some evenings, I sit near the window with a cup of warm tea. I listen to the distant sounds, birds settling into the trees, children playing far away, a door closing somewhere down the street. Small sounds that somehow feel like company. Sometimes I think back to those days, the painful ones, the ones when I felt forgotten, unseen, and unwanted. I used to replay them in my mind like old films. I wondered what I did wrong. I wondered if I could have been a different kind of mother, a different kind of human, just to make people stay. But life has a way of softening sharp memories. What once felt like a deep open wound now feels like a faded scar, gentle when touched. I think about my son often. Not with anger, not with regret, just understanding. I know now that he wasn't trying to hurt me when he forgot my sacrifices. He was simply walking through life with young eyes, eyes that didn't yet know what time teaches all of us. When we are young, we believe love will always be there waiting. We assume people who care for us will stay strong forever. We forget that even the ones who raised us also need gentleness. It took distance for him to see the truth. It took silence for him to hear my absence. And I learned something too. I learned that my worth isn't tied to how someone treats me. My sacrifices don't vanish just because someone fails to acknowledge them. My love doesn't become smaller if someone forgets it for a while. I am still me. I am still whole. Some nights, when the wind brushes against my curtains, I remember the last time my son held my hand. The warmth in his voice when he said, "Mom, I'm sorry." I see everything now. Those words weren't just an apology. They were a bridge, a gentle path back to each other. Healing doesn't happen loudly. It happens in small moments, quiet conversations, softer eyes, a hand reaching out without pride or fear. We still have a long road ahead, my son and I. But we walk it slowly, with patience. We no longer expect perfection from each other. We simply choose understanding, one day at a time. And strangely, I'm grateful. Not for the hurt, but for the growth it brought. For the space it created for honesty. For the reminder that love, even when bruised, can still find its way back. If someone asked me today what I learned from all this, I would say this: people forget. But life always reminds them. Sometimes gently, sometimes painfully, but eventually, it shows the truth. I learned that holding bitterness only weighs down my own heart. Forgiveness, on the other hand, feels like opening a window after years of stale air. I forgave my son, and in a way, I forgave myself too. As I finish this cup of tea, I glance at the small photo frame on my shelf. It's a picture of my son as a child, smiling with missing front teeth, holding my hand like he never wanted to let go. I smile back at that memory. Because now, I know something important, something I wish I knew earlier in life. Love doesn't disappear. It just gets lost sometimes. And when it finds its way home, it returns softer, wiser, and more grateful. I close my eyes for a moment and whisper a little prayer. Not for a perfect life. Not for people to always understand me. Just for peace, in my heart. And in the hearts of those I love. And as the evening settles in fully, I breathe a quiet, steady breath. Life may not have been easy. But it has been honest. And in the end, love, real love, remembered me. And that, I think, is enough.